right now we're in a little bit of a different environment than in years past. I mean, if you look at the last recession or strong recession that we had back in 2008, that was at a time where you had commodities at all-time highs. You had gold at $1,900 an ounce. You had base metals much higher than they were today. And then with that being said, when the recession came around, you had a really inability to access capital. But I think that was a unique situation last go around that you're not seeing right now. We've been in roughly like a 9-10 year bear market for the commodities and relative to global equities. There is at an inflection point, I think that you are going to see mining equities perform well in this last leg of the economic growth cycle.
Thanks for watching this RTD interview. Don't forget to pick up your RTD Scary George round, only available at stbullion.com. Now enjoy this interview. Welcome to this Rethinking the Dollar interview. Today I'm excited to have first-time guest, Mr. Max Porterfield. He's the president and director of Callanetics Mines Incorporated. And today Max joins us to share his thoughts on the economy, the importance of precious metals, and some great opportunities in the mining sector. So Max Porterfield, welcome to Rethinking the Dollar.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Well, I appreciate you taking time. And so looking forward to getting your thoughts on a variety of subject matter, particularly with the economy and things of that nature and all the opportunities that exist when it comes to mining, the mining sector in particular, because as I mentioned prior to going live, my goal is to provide the audience, opportunities outside of the conventional holding gold and silver. And so I believe there's ways of diversifying yourself a little bit. So looking forward to getting your thoughts on that. But before we move any further, for those that may not know Max Porterfield, can you give us a little bit of your background and how you arrived at this point in your career?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I'm originally a Texan. Started my career working at a company called U.S. Global Investors, which is a boutique investment firm that specializes in natural resource and precious metals investing. And then after about 5 years, I took my talents here to Vancouver, BC. Living in Canada. Moved here about 7 years ago. Spent a couple of years at two well-respected resource companies doing investor relations and corporate communications. And then 5 years ago, I took over the helm here at Callanetics and been busy growing the company ever since and exploring for mines in Canada.
All right. Well, I appreciate you for sharing that for us. And so very first question, the show is called Rethinking the Dollar. And so it's about educating people outside of conventional information that's shared. And so I'm curious to find out for you personally, what comes to mind when Max Porterfield hears the words Rethinking the Dollar?
Instantly pops in my head is rethinking the dollar's role as the world's reserve currency. I think that's something that's being rethought globally. And it's something definitely that kind of chimes in when I hear it as well.
All right. I appreciate that. And so next question, a part of the education process is getting people to open up their eyes to opportunities outside of just what we're being told. And of course, we know from this channel here, holding precious metals is extremely important in the days ahead, and especially now. So I'm curious, as far as an educational standpoint, in your opinion, why is it important, probably more so now than ever, for people to really begin opening up their horizons to new opportunities, perhaps in the mining sector or whatever other opportunities that might be out there?
I think new opportunities are what creates new wealth opportunities, most certainly. I think that if you look at Canada's role, for example, in the marijuana industry, Canada was really ahead of the global finance sector, the industry overall. In terms of realizing there's an opportunity as a new industry opening up and then financing capitalized that. So there's some real wealth created in that. You saw the same thing with the cryptocurrencies as well. We'll see where they kind of ultimately end up longer term. But I think being open to those ideas and being an early mover into new industries opening up is a huge opportunity for investors and creating wealth for themselves.
Interesting. And so I'm curious, as we're approaching the end of 2019, and so by you being president and director of a mining company, I'm assuming you keep your eyes and ears to the ground on a variety of subject matter that impacts your industry as well as those that might be close to your industry. And so at this current point, what are some things perhaps that you might want to share with us that are of concern to you in regards to the economy, the global economy, or just, conditions in Canada or whatnot? What's some things that you're keeping an eye on?
Well, in terms of the business side of things, obviously we're always keeping an eye on where we're exploring in the geopolitical situation in those countries. being focused in Canada, obviously we like Canada being a tier one jurisdiction. Overall, in terms of the global macroeconomic factors that impact the business, one of the key things is the ongoing trade dispute between the United States and China. Obviously, the tariffs. Being a base metals focused company, based in precious metals at that, but the base metal side of the component of the situation is really focusing on what are the future impacts of government policy on potential consumption of those base metals, because consumption of base metals is dependent on global growth. When you enter a trade war like you saw occur last year, which is something we definitely don't see normally, that's going to throw into concerns about potential for global growth moving forward. So any kind of alleviation to those disputes could have a big impact on global consumption and global growth. With that being said, I'm also seeing concerns with government policy and central bank policy, and this kind of these politicians globally really focused on being reelected and doing everything in their power to keep the economy on track to do so. At some point in the future, you can only reduce rates so low before you can no longer reduce rates to stimulate the economy. And that's one of the things I'd say more or less in being concerned. With that being said, obviously, as your readers and viewers would be attuned to, that creates a real opportunity and a necessity for having exposure to the precious metals markets, as you kind of alluded to earlier, to offset that risk, because precious metals are going to perform great in a low interest rate environment, a negative real interest rate environment, which we're seeing globally right now. And you've also seen the precious metals follow suit and perform well relative to a lot of other asset classes.
All right, good point there. Now, I'm glad you mentioned the precious metals aspect, so we're definitely going to get into that in more in depth. But I'm curious to find out, from your standpoint. And so, as you mentioned, concerns about the trade war, the economic slowdown, or whatnot, and the reflection will ultimately be in the prices of metals. And so, I think it was midsummer and whatnot, we had a little bit of an increase in gold and silver. And so, no doubt you keep an eye on that. So, in your opinion, what kind of sparked that, and is that something we can look forward to in 2020, or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the precious metals component of anybody's portfolio is something you always need to have exposure to. In terms of the price move that you saw in precious metals and gold in particular, earlier this year, I think it was something that was long overdue. I think that was driven by a lot of uncertainty out there. And the more uncertain people are, they usually flock to gold as a safe haven. With that being said, everyone gets really excited, the gold bugs out there, when you have a move like that in precious metals and always want more. I do think that we need to consolidate at a higher level before we move higher moving forward, because ultimately while the recent pullback you see in the precious metals is because of some optimism on potentially a deal being done between the US and China. I think longer term there's still issues at hand that are going to lead to higher precious metals prices, as well as other commodities and real assets.
Interesting. Now, one thing I do not hear much about is the trade situation and how it impacts Canada. And so, for the U.S. viewers here, can you shine a little bit of light or share your thoughts of what you've noticed in regards to how Canada relates to this whole global trade war situation?
Well, there's a lot of mining, and it's a rich history in terms of obviously formation of capital for exploration and development of new mines. I mean, Vancouver and Toronto are big hubs for that. And Canada overall is a well-respected mining jurisdiction to feed that supply. So with that being said, exploration is going to be dependent on commodity prices. Obviously, higher commodity prices are going to incentivize higher risk capital to come in and explore for and develop new mines. And that's really obviously critical to that. So anytime you have a pullback in commodity prices, like you saw in the base metals per se, you're going to have some hesitation in terms of incentivizing companies to go out there and explore for new deposits.
Interesting. Now, I'm curious, and so we're definitely, I want to get into more of what you have going on at Callanetics Mines. And so, as far as economic slowdown aspect, so a lot of people out there are concerned with that aspect, and you hinted at that earlier. And so, I'm not too familiar with the performance of mining stocks during recessionary timeframes. Could you educate us a little bit on what has happened in the past and what you possibly could anticipate occurring if we reach a recession or economic slowdown, or however it might be painted?
Yeah, I think right now we're in a little bit of a different environment than in years past. I mean, if you look at the last recession or strong recession that we had back in 2008, that was at a time where you had commodities at all-time highs. You had gold at $1,900 an ounce. You had base metals much higher than they were today. And then with that being said, when the recession came around, you had a really inability to access capital. And so that led to a drawdown in the mining related equities, because when you're not a company that generates revenue, you're dependent on the capital markets. The capital markets freeze up, and then obviously the viability of the organization or the business is going to be in question if you're unable to access capital. But I think that was a unique situation last go around that you're not seeing right now. We've been in roughly like a 9-10 year bear market for the mining equities. If you look at mining equities, commodities, in relative to global equities, there is at an inflection point. I think that you are going to see mining equities perform well in this last leg of the economic growth cycle. And then in terms of commodity space in mining equities, I think that it's going to be company dependent, company driven. For example, Callanetics, we're out there actively exploring to make new discoveries. That's obviously the highest risk portion of the mining sector in terms of there's exploration, there's development, and there's production. But exploration, while being the highest risk, is also delivers the biggest rewards and upside to investors. So I think in our case in particular, making a discovery in a positive upside for mining equities is obviously going to further provide a return to shareholders. Making an economic discovery and a big discovery in a down market is going to still create a tremendous amount of value for your shareholder base. So you can't do that in many sectors, quite frankly.
Right. Good point. Thank you for sharing that. And so, last question before we head into Callanetics Mines Incorporated, monetary policy. And so that's one thing that a lot of people, especially in the alternative media space, is really concerned with, because we have repo market activity here in the U.S. and I'm not sure what's happening up in Canada, but I imagine you guys probably have some type of situation of that kind as well. Monetary policy moving forward will probably be a driving force in asset pricing in general. And so, do you see the race to zero interest rate wise being a benefit to the mining or to the precious metals in general, and then trickle into the mining sector?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you have a negative real interest rate environment, you're going to have precious metals perform well relative to that, and real assets in general overall. So I think it's a tremendous opportunity from a precious metals investor standpoint. While I don't think that's a good thing globally, definitely you can reminisce really what's gone on in Japan over the past several years and the problems that they've been in terms of trying to get out of that situation that they're in is a concern, obviously. But you should see precious metals perform well in a negative real interest rate environment. You've already seen that be the case. You look at Europe, some of the bonds are, negative yields out of the gate. And when you add in inflation, it's even worse. So really, your argument to why you would want to hold a bond relative to precious metals is muted, because oftentimes precious metals gets knocked for not having a return. But I tell you, holding precious metals is better than getting a negative return on your money. And so definitely I think there's going to be a flight to precious metals in that type of environment. But it is a concern because, you really use your own one tool to stimulate the economy. You can only use it so much before the wheels fall off. And we will see how that plays out, but it's not something that is too exciting. I think in Canada, my concern with the Canadian economy right now is the consumer debt levels. You look at housing prices in Canada, they're very, very concerning, just the cost of living. So, at some point, there's going to be a tipping point, and everyone's going to have to wake up and make adjustments based upon that.
Thanks for watching this interview. If you're enjoying content like this, feel free to become a part of the RTD community by becoming a member via Patreon. All it takes is a monthly contribution of about $5 a month for more great content such as this. Just scroll down beneath this video here and click the Patreon link, and then hit this tab right here to become a member of the team. Looking forward to bringing you more great content. Now, let's get back to this interview. Thanks. So it sounds like, Canada is pretty much in a similar situation that we're in here, as well as a variety of other countries. And so we kind of covered some of the issues and the problems. So now I'm looking forward to diving more into opportunities, possibly. And so Callanetics Mines Incorporated, for those that may not know much about that, give us some of the foundational pieces, the longevity of the company, the team there. Shine a little light on Callanetics Mines for us.
Yeah, so Callanetics is a company that actually dates back to 1927 when a guy named Jack Callanan IPO'd on some exploration properties in northern Manitoba and the Flin Flon Greenstone Belt, which is a very prolific mining jurisdiction globally for these high-grade polymetallic base and precious metals rich deposits. There have been a number of economic discoveries made in the company's portfolio over the years, and most notably the 777 mine, which is a very large mine that's had a long mine life in Flin Flon, was discovered and was paying a large royalty stream to Callanetics Mines, our predecessor company. In 2011, the company was split into two entities. Callanetics was carried on to be a royalty company and was later acquired, and the exploration portfolio that was in that company was spun into Callanetics. I came in and took over Callanetics in mid-2014. Had been focused on exploring in another area of the world. We refocused back to kind of the bread and butter and the roots of the company's history for these high-grade polymetallic deposits in Flin Flon. And then obviously always looking for opportunities, being opportunistic. At the bottom of the zinc cycle, when zinc was sub 70 cents, we diversified the portfolio, acquired 3 zinc rich VMS deposits located in the Bathurst camp of New Brunswick, another tier 1 jurisdiction for these type of deposits, as well as in Newfoundland in the Buckens camp. Since that time, we've actively explored those projects, really focused in the Bathurst camp, in the Flin Flon camp, had great success in doubling the resource base last year, and actually put out a maiden preliminary economic assessment on the viability of a potential mining operation in Bathurst and New Brunswick there, right at a time when the global trade war kind of broke loose. And again, that was kind of a risk-off move, signal to the markets because of global growth concerns. Obviously, since then, Callanetics shares have been hit pretty dramatically. I've been a big acquirer in the open market myself of the stock, but the underlying assets of the company haven't changed. The zinc prices did come down, but we were never focusing long-term goals and objectives based upon $1.60 zinc, where zinc was last year. Zinc today is roughly $1.10 a pound, which I think is a much healthier price environment. Is still a very tight market overall, particularly on the refined metal, the zinc metal, refined metal itself. And so with that being said, moving forward over the next 12 months, the goal for the company is to discover 3 deposits that will be economic at some point in the future in 3 of these jurisdictions that we're actively exploring.
All right. Okay. Interesting. So I thought, thank you for sharing that. And so you gave us a lot of detail in there. And so, a lot of the audience, we're newbies here. And so me personally, as I mentioned before going live, just getting into understanding the basics of things. And so I want to dissect a little bit of what you said and give it to the layman out here, because a lot of people here, they're also new. And so, you mentioned zinc, gold deposits there and the 3 projects or whatnot. And so a lot of people aren't familiar with zinc from an investment standpoint. Can you just go back, give us the ABCs of, how that can benefit and be an alternative to someone's portfolio investment-wise, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have exposure to zinc. The properties also have exposure to copper as well. Copper, zinc, and lead as well are all 3 base metals. They're really the building blocks of the global economy. If you look at zinc, for example, it's the 4th most consumed metal in the world. And over 55% of zinc demand is for galvanization of steel. So essentially it's coated on steel, so it prevents it from corroding, rusting, and really increases the life of infrastructure. So if you look at base metals overall, they're in touch every day of your life, whether you get in your car, turn your lights on at your home, touch your cell phone. It's everywhere. It's oftentimes why you look at copper, for example, they look at copper prices and call it Dr. Copper. It's kind of get a pulse of how well the global economy is doing based upon copper prices, because if you've got a strong global economy, you're going to have stronger copper prices. So, you want to have exposure to these real assets. While precious metals obviously gets a lot of the attention, everyone has that allure to precious metals as a currency as well, for jewelry too. Base metals are absolutely integral to the global economy. I think having a diversified approach is the prudent approach for investing. A lot of people don't realize that in terms of gold gets all the attention, and 75% of gold, all exploration dollars raised actually go for gold exploration. But, you still need copper, you still need zinc, you still need lead. You need all these metals to really build the global economy.
Interesting. Now, currently, based upon the metals you mentioned, the base as well as the precious metals, and according to the projects that you guys have going on now, what's currently being pulled out and what's currently down in ground, ready to be pulled out, based upon some of the information you shared a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so we're an exploration company. We're out there to look to make a discovery of new mineralization that would go on to be economic producing mines, more than likely by an operator. So typically in the industry, you have exploration companies that explore for these new and make new discoveries, and then they get acquired by the development and producing companies to go into production. There's different phases of that. With that being said, the most advanced set of assets that the company has are in Bathurst. The Nash Creek deposit and Superjack deposit both have resources. And the Nash Creek deposit, we acquired, both of those we acquired at the bottom of the zinc cycle. I really like to say pennies on the dollar. We were able to almost double the resource base at Nash Creek in a very short period of time. I got to tip my hat off to the technical team at Callanetics for accomplishing that goal. And with that, we put a maiden preliminary economic assessment on that showed the net present value of those deposits out in New Brunswick at $128 million post-tax. So, that's how you can show real value through exploration. But with that being said, right now we're currently drill testing 22 targets, primarily at the Nash Creek deposit, a couple at the Superjack project, to grow that resource base to further improve economics, because that's one of the really opportunities we learned from the PEA, or preliminary economic assessment, that we put out, was that any additional mineralization that we're able to discover, particularly higher grade mineralization or mineralization that's closer to surface, can be brought earlier into that mine life and further improve economics. So the PEA we put out was kind of a initial look in terms of what is something an operation would look like at Nash Creek and Superjack out in New Brunswick. And we were now looking to grow the resource base and move and advance those assets based upon what we learned there, and unleashing the tools that we've learned to use successfully historically at those projects on a district scale. Because these VMS deposits occur in clusters. As I mentioned, in Flin Flon, there's been 32 mines and counting. In New Brunswick and Nash Creek, the Nash Creek deposit's the only mine that's been found on that trend that we can completely control ourselves. And there should be numerous others, but no one's actually ever, spent the time to go out and look for those. Now, if you look at Flin Flon, for example, Flin Flon's a much earlier stage. We have some smaller historic resources. But again, the area that we're exploring, Pine Bay, is an area that's always had the geological pedigree to host a large, high-grade VMS deposit that'd be rich in base and precious metals. The last true operator of the property prior to Callanetics exploring, starting in 2015, was Placerdome, which is a very well-respected exploration company, very, very big, and they were producing as well. And they had a mandate to discover a 30 million ton ore body at Pine Bay when they explored the area. Inmet was another well-respected company that briefly explored the property after Pine Bay in the mid-1990s. They had a mandate for a 20 million ton deposit. For example, the 777 ore body that's producing today is well over 20 million tons. I think they've pulled out more than $4.5 billion of metal in the ground since that went into production. So making a big discovery can create a lot of wealth for the shareholders, can create a lot of tax revenue for the economy and the people of Manitoba, and then create a lot of economic drivers locally in the town of Flin Flon. What we're doing there is we're taking a new approach. We had a big discovery in 2016 that really got the market excited. Actually, to give you an idea, the valuation of the company at that time was roughly $55 million Canadian. Today, we've got a $10 million market cap. At the time, we didn't have all the success in New Brunswick. And really, the market got sold off because on this global trade wars. So when we had that big discovery, though, the mineralization style was atypical than what you typically find in Flin Flon. It was very lowly conductive, and all the Flin Flon mines are highly conductive. So what we did is we're bringing a new tool set and a new approach to the Pine Bay property to target and see where that might host a large deposit. We'll be drill testing that, and obviously a success with the drill bit there and making a discovery there could turn into something really special and be a big win for the shareholder base. So we're quite eager to get that all going on.
Sounds good. So basically, sounds like a lot of activity on you guys' behalf there, and so it looks like from a leadership standpoint, you guys are very active. And so I'm curious to find out, short term, 5 year, 10 years from now, based upon all the activity that's going on now, where do you see the company growing size wise? Give us some numbers if you don't mind, just guessing based upon activity you foresee coming and currently underway now.
Yeah, so again, the activity is we're drill testing these targets in New Brunswick. The goal there is to have a number of successful discoveries, and then once we have those discoveries, we'll need to follow up and see what the true potential of those discoveries would yield in terms of drilling out what are the size of those discoveries, how big are those potential deposits once we make those discoveries. In Flin Flon, with the new approach that we're taking, I think you can have a big long-term impact for how mines are found in the Flin Flon camp. The targets that we're generating there are sizable in terms of their potential. Same story with New Brunswick. Make a discovery in Flin Flon and then follow up in the new year to see what the extent of that is. Obviously, discovery in Flin Flon at this time when the processing facility is in need of mineralization is going to be a big short-term catalyst. Probably put us instantly in the talk of being taken out. It can create a tremendous amount of value. I think if you look at the valuation of the company, where we were just even last year, we were at $35–40 million valuation to where we are today. The assets have only gotten better because our technical team spent further time generating these no targets. We've remained strong. We've got a strong treasury to see what the potential is by drill testing the targets in New Brunswick as well as in Flin Flon. And then obviously we get a revaluation based upon making discoveries out there. So again, we were $35 million valuation at the lowest today. I mean, this year we got down to almost a $4 million valuation. We're at $10 million valuation today with catalysts in the pipeline to really drive us higher based upon success. And then, when you get taken out based upon really the size of the deposit that you discover. So really the sky's the limit in terms of where things can go from the foreseeable future.
Sounds good. So Callanetics Mines Incorporated, and so you guys are publicly traded. Can you give us the ticker symbols and where you can, and then also where the viewers can go back and find out more information, and can they reach out to you or your team and just get more education on some of the projects you've given us, and so they can better understand what's going on down there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we trade on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the ticker CNX. For U.S. investors, we trade in the OTC under the ticker CLLXF. And you can find more information about what we're up-to-date corporate presentations and news releases on our website at callanetics.ca. That's CALLINEX.ca. And then our contact information is on there to give us a call or shoot us an email, whatever you prefer. I love speaking to investors, so calls are welcome. We always take the time, and you can hear about the company that way.
All right, sounds good. Well, Max Porterfield, it's been great having you on Rethinking the Dollar. Looking forward to continue to keep an eye on the project there, and then definitely, hopefully, have you back on perhaps next year as things unfold and develop even further to get an assessment at where we're at that point. But once again, thanks for tuning in, or thanks for joining us here on Rethinking the Dollar.
Thanks so much for having me, and look forward to get to drilling in Canada here.